demonstrated a few ways to create splatters and scratches to create watercolor textures. Now let's explore some other ways to create special effects with watercolors. Now those scratches were for things such as whiskers on pets, posts, masts, grasses, branches. Lifts are for clouds, poles, abstractions, just pieces of light and foliage. So let's get some paint out here. And this, we're going to use Kleenex on this one. And I just want to go ahead and paint these areas so they can be drying while I talk about the others. Because again, a lot of these techniques have to be done after the glisten leaves the paper. You want the paper damp rather than glistening and wet. So I'll go through what I'm going to use here, and that will be tissue, Kleenex, brushes, masking tape, various sponges, Mr. Clean, bubble wrap, and plastic. So the first thing I'll use is Kleenex, toilet paper, tissue. If this were a little damper, I could pick up a different sort of look, but I'm going to wet the toilet paper and then just sort of brush it across. Great for a cloud. My next technique, I've got these stiff brushes, and these are Simply Simmons. I have them of all sizes, flats and rounds, and what I do is I take the brush, I wet it, I dry it off, and then I will sort of scrape back and forth. And this makes a great soft lift. You don't have to blot it, but that'll be a soft edged lift on damp paper. Now I've also got dry paper, and the same thing. I'll dry the brush off after I've wet it and cleaned it, and then I'm just going to gently go back and forth and lift that paint up. And you want to be sure you get the paint into the brush and off the paper. The next technique, I put some masking tape down, and I left a nice white area. You can also use adhesive paper on something like this. You can also use various sponges such as elephant ear sponges, cellulose, any kind of sponge, and you can dampen it, squeeze out the water, take it to a paper towel, and just scrub wherever you need some sort of a lift out. I like to blot that afterwards. Here's a wonderful lifting technique, and it's using the Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. And I just get the regular Mr. Clean from the drugstore or the, my box store. And say I want to put a ship mast on, so I might paint the entire sky, and then I might use some masking tape there to secure just where I want Mr. Clean to go, because it will rub out outside of those edges if I don't tell it just where to go. So I wet it, squeeze all the water out, blot it to a paper towel, then scrub fairly briskly. I can get this just light or all the way to white depending on what it is I want. And then I take the masking tape off. And voila. Now this also does abrade the paper. You want to be sure you're finished with most of these techniques, not all of them, but this one will abrade the paper. The last two I have here today are bubble wrap, and I just painted this area, left it wet, pressed some bubble wrap down on there and weighted it down, and it leaves a little bit of a mark, and it's akin to lichens, moss, something like that. And then you can also use this. This is great for stones, lichens, moss, just any kind of mylar or paper or plastic or shrink wrap or saran wrap. And when the paint is wet, you just scrumble it up, crumble it up, weight it down, and then when it's dry, take it off. So we just did lifts, and we often use lifts for clouds, poles, abstractions, pieces of light and foliage. How about accoutrement? That's just some of those extra things that are not especially watercolor, but are really great to use with watercolor. Let's cover this guy up, and we'll bring this Micron pen out. There are so many waterproof pens made today. This one is a Micron pen, which is lovely to use, and it is waterproof. And you can see I went ahead and painted some outlines there. If you are a sketch artist and you'd like to work in pen and ink, this is a great way to work using these little waterproof Micron pens. That's the ticket. So we're just going to add a little pinkish here, and you can see how nice that is. So there we go. Another thing you can use, surprisingly, is crayons or wax candles, and that will repel the watercolor paint. It is permanent. It will not come off of your paper, but you can use it. I often will use just a little bit of crayon if I'm painting a lot of foliage and I just want to get some squiggles in there. I just want something sort of indefinite, and that will often work for that. So we'll use a little red in here, and we'll use a little green. But anyway, some nice crayon sometimes will do the trick. Now over here I've got Caran d'Ache, and this is water soluble. And all I have to do is put a wet brush to it, and this is going to melt into watercolor paint. Look at that. But it leaves a bit of a rough texture. What a beautiful thing it is, and a beautiful way to paint and to add just a little bit of texture. Now over here I've used some pastels, and I've painted an undercoat there. So I will load my brush with blue, and I'm just painting over the pastels, and they do tend to just add a little bit of texture and sort of melt into the watercolors. And that's sometimes a nice way to paint and add some softness. It's great for fur also. You can also use these pastels on top of a painting. Let's say you want some clouds, you just want a nice soft edged, and this is dry paper. You can just take some pastels and just kind of take them lightly over the watercolor paper. Gouache is another type of water media that you can use. I often carry a tube of white with me, as you can see, and it mixes well with any watercolor paint to make it more opaque, or you can purchase many opaque colors. And sometimes I like to paint an undercoat in gouache, and this is white gouache mixed with quinacridone rose to make a nice pinky tone. And I just take my brush and dilute this gouache, and let's say I wanted like a beautiful flower perhaps. And so I can just paint the petals and make a rose sort of color. It's really great for, say, a porch scene where you just want, or a garden scene where you just want a nice pinkish undertone. I also often use gouache on top just to pull out some lights and some areas that I feel need to just have a little bit more definition. Next, I've got some watercolor pencils. These are some Van Gogh watercolor pencils, and they are water soluble, and all I have to do is just touch some water to them and watch what happens. They will dissolve. You can leave some of them unmoistened or moisten the whole area, and it's another kind of fun way to add some texture to your work. And last but not least, I want to come into the watercolor ink. These are Hydrus watercolor inks. Incredibly vibrant, so you do want to be careful. These are also permanent, and you just want to squeeze a little bit out there. It doesn't take very much. And let's say you're not getting quite the brilliant color that you want, so you might put some watercolor ink there. And that will be much, can you see how much more brilliant that is? So these are some of the extra things that you can use for watercolors. Now let's see several ways to layer your watercolor paintings, and this is just fun. Sometimes you need these things for foliage or just making marks and enjoying textures. So first I've got sponge here, and of course there are so many types of sponges. You've got elephant ear sponges and all sorts of things, and so what I would recommend is you wet the sponge and then perhaps put it in some paint, and you might test it and then just plop it down there in whatever way you desire. This is a new product that I got from the UK called Brushos. Very exciting. It's brilliant, brilliant color, and the more you wet it, the more it will spread out. So sometimes I use it for an underwash or just when I need a little pop of color. Now, you need to put a nail or something in the top, make a hole, and again, you have to be really, really careful. You don't need very much. I'm just going to sprinkle it on here, and then you spray it with water. Now watch what happens. I'm just going to spray. Brilliant. And I've also got some white here. So this is just something fun to try. This might not be a product for everyone, but it certainly is a fun one. Now, as far as layering goes, bubble wrap is a nice thing to use too. Again, I would probably just dampen it, roll it in a little paint, and then press it on top of an area that I might want, you know, a little texture in. I think you can see that all of these textures would be great for rocks and foliage and natural textures also. Now you can also take a piece of paper towel that's textured and you can rub some paint on top of that and just rub it across the surface and then press that down, and let's see what happens there. Just give it a press. Oops, that didn't really come through. I guess I'll have to use darker paint for that if I want to do it, but we'll try that again, and we'll just paint some paint and we'll just press it down. And that didn't work so well, but I think you understand what I'm talking about. We also have just regular saran wrap. I can just paint on that surface and take that, put it down, and then of course I would weight that down normally with something. Here's another thing you can use for texture, just a vegetable bag or a fruit bag, and you can either press it down or you can just paint through it. And then lift it up and just get irregular textures out of it. I'm just painting some different colors on here to see what sort of textures I can get, and then lifting it up. Now here are the last two, stencil positive and stencil negative. And what I'm going to do is just I'll lay a letter here, and this might work better with a sponge, but you can use either a sponge or a brush and just go onto the stencil, paint what you want down on there, lift it up, and then I want to clean the stencil off, of course. And then for the stencil negative, what I'm going to do is I have a painted area, and I'm going to lay the stencil down carefully where I want it. And I'm going to use some Mr. Clean, or you can use a sponge, and I'm going to wet it, squeeze all the water out. And then I'm going to just gently rub and get that out. I have used this before for a floral where I wrote some poetry on top of the painting. So there are some different ways to layer. Thank you for joining me on Watercolor Essentials today. I hope you enjoyed learning about the 5 skills of watercolor painting and some of the special effects that you can make. Practice on your own, and the more you practice, the better your skills will become. You might think about making some practice boards of your own, like I have here. Happy painting! Thanks again.